Dan and Pat, this is an episode that I've been waiting for a long time. I am a huge fan of your show. I'm a member of the website. For anybody who is not a member of the website, go stop this podcast. Subscribe now. It's worth every penny. I mean, some of the guests that you guys get on are unbelievable. Your knowledge is unbelievable. The content is unbelievable. So I'm going to start with you first, Dan. Why Slappin' Glass? Why is it not like 360 Windmill or something like that?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for that intro. We appreciate that. And, at the end of every podcast episode, as it's fading out, we actually have what was the live, time that we actually came up with the name Slapping Glass on air. And it was just completely random where early on, as we we're trying to figure out how to name this company that we were trying to start, Pat and I have a thing for trying to name things. It's always tough coming up with names and titles. And we were just throwing around different ideas before we hit record. And I threw out something like, hey, slapping backboard or something. And Pat just said slapping glass. We both started laughing. And that's where it came from. Simple as that.
So during the intro to those podcast episodes, it's literally there's you guys talking and it's slapping glass. Okay, slapping glass. That's literally how it started.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool.
We ran through tons of other stinkers, of names first, but it worked out.
I think, Dan, didn't you were looking up what domains were free, domain names, like basketball domain names, a huge list, and you were just like rattling them off, and then slapping backboard, and then it was just kind of off the cusp, slapping glass. Like you said, the laugh sealed the deal. We both enjoyed it.
It was available on GoDaddy.
Yeah.
Right. We all remember that first time we were tall enough or athletic enough, or in some cases maybe never, but could slap the backboard or slap the glass when you're making a layup or something. It was always
a good day in high school. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so many people listen to the podcast. I'm not sure how many people know you guys personally, but Pat, give us a 2-minute rundown. Where are you from? Where are you based now? How did you get into basketball? And then how did you slowly transition into what you're doing now?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. So, I was born and raised in Southern California, Orange County. So grew up there my whole life. Got into basketball and basically through my dad always played. He played in college. So, he would play twice a week with his buddies and I would always go and watch until I was old enough to play. So, played in high school, played and then in college where I met Dan. We were teammates at Chapman University, a D3 right in Orange County. So we didn't go very far. And then, after graduation, I still wanted to play. So was lucky enough to find a club out in Germany. So I came over to Germany and started at a low level, but kind of worked my way up and built a career over 14, 15 years. And then retired the last full season before COVID. So then tried to get into coaching at a really good time when COVID kind of shut everything down and destroyed budgets. And then, that's where slowly, I think, so I was not coaching. Dan's season was also canceled during COVID. I'll move a little bit quickly. We can hash it more over it, but me and Dan, I think it was Dan's kind of idea. We're both watching film. We both we were always talking basketball. So we started just slowly throwing some stuff up on Twitter. It started with like this Yeshiva and their 5-out motion offense that got a lot of traction. And then from there we thought, okay, well, we're also interested in this offense and understanding it. And for our own benefit, let's try to talk to that coach. And he was nice enough to come on, and that was like our first podcast. And from there, we enjoyed the experience. We enjoyed first learning. And again, we were trying to just grow and develop at this time when, no one could get in a gym. And we were lucky enough, I think, at the right time. And it just kind of, let's say, snowballed from there. We just kept pursuing it, kept trying to interview as many people as we could. And a little dumb luck, serendipitous, but some hard work, obviously, too. And now we are where we are.
Really cool. So let me ask you this, Pat. Playing at a Division III level, was it hard getting looks for pros overseas? Was the Division III ever like a constraint or a hurdle that they had a concern with?
For sure. I mean, definitely if you're try to get into the higher leagues, I mean, you're just competing against not only other good D3 players, but then of course D2s and D1s, NAIAs, and also pros who have been in Europe. So it's a super competitive market, and you're not really coming from let's say I mean, as me and Dan will attest to, it's a very good level, good basketball, but there's so many D3 schools. Of course, they're not going to be well known all over the world, or really that level gets overlooked. So, I recruited the help or got the help of the Occidental coach, Coach Brian Newhall, who had placed players and coached over in Europe. And he was really instrumental in just like what leagues I can break into where guys like me and from my level will get a shot. Now it's low level. It's not the highest level league by any means, but it's just all about getting over here, getting seen, getting an opportunity, and then just being persistent and building a career from there. So, I mean, I started in the 5th league of Germany, which, it might have been even worse than D3 basketball. Oh, not that D3 basketball is, but below lower. But you're over here and you can just start trying to then from there. It was just trying to get the practices, talk to people, meet people, and get opportunities wherever I can.
Right. Really cool. Really cool. And how about you, Dan? What's your background? How'd you get into basketball, and how'd you get into transition to what you're doing now?
Yeah, so like Pat mentioned, we were teammates. I was good at passing Pat the ball in college, and that's no, I love my time playing D3 basketball, but when I was done, it was time for me to do something else. And so my quick foray into coaching was I didn't start in coaching. I went into the business world first, worked for a mutual fund company out of college for a couple of years. Quickly realized that was not where I wanted to be and not what I wanted to do, but saved up enough money to kind of, buy myself some time after I decided I was going to leave. I'm also a musician, so I left my job in the mutual fund industry to go on a tour for a while with an album I had released. And when I got back from that tour, I needed a way to make some money as I got back. And so the JV head job was open at the high school I went to at my alma mater, and my buddy was the head coach, and he said, "Hey, do you want to try to help out this year?" I said yes. The first day of practice, I was hooked. I mean, I absolutely loved it and got into coaching from there. And then I spent 4 years at the high school level, and then 4 years after that, the head assistant job opened up at Chapman, where I played, and been back 11 years since that time.
Wow.
So 15 years total in coaching at this point.
Really cool. I mean, like many other people, I'm a huge fan of your podcast. You have all types of people on all different levels, and that's what I really love about it. Having interviewed hundreds of people at this point, what is something that you are seeing in terms of offense, Pat, that is kind of trending in today's game? I know this could be like an entire workshop, but you guys have just such a wealth of knowledge and talking to some of the brightest people in the industry. What's one thing that you're really seeing that it's kind of trending a certain way?
Yeah, I mean, first, thanks for sending this the question beforehand, because this is as you said, I can kind of better organize my thoughts, because we have been lucky and fortunate enough that we've learned a lot. And I mean, you ask me on a different week, I could tell you what I think is trending, but I think for me, and what me and Dan keep coming back to a lot and noticing, is how teams use the pick and roll to just use the pick and roll to set up, like put the defense in their shell, and then how they kind of attack it with really not even dribbling, more or less using it. We call it like the extra pass, just getting them in that low help and then swinging the ball to get to corner closeouts. And we've done a lot on that and talked about it. But I think too, another big thing is just playing through the pop, and basically, especially in like middle thirds, using the pick and roll to just get the big to defend one pick and roll, pop the big, and then playing to a second side action on the outer thirds, long DHOs or pitch aheads. And we're finding what we've been seeing and what we've thought ourselves is it simplifies the pick and roll reads. I mean, the pick and roll can be difficult to navigate. It's so complex that if you can kind of create on a single side, get maybe the guard going downhill, it just makes it simpler. There's less backside help. Maybe again, you're hoping by playing through the pop that big is late to rotate over, as well as there's no second help behind the ball. And so we've been noticing that a lot, just, as ways to, if a team has a really good, they're tough to attack on that first coverage, well, then let's make the big, whether it's a drop or a hedge, let's just test his lateral quickness, see if they can defend 2 actions rather than we know they can load up and defend 1, or vice versa. Maybe, you just we're not a great pick and roll team. So let's get to a second side action, maybe get a guard going downhill, playing through a DHO where he can sprint up out of the corner as that big's popping. Has been something that we've thought a lot about and have talked to coaches, and obviously continue to see just like how to weaponize the pop. And we've talked to a lot of coaches too, like just the difficulty of defending the pop then of course, if the big man can shoot and if he can dribble, like just that it puts so much pressure on the defense. So, right now at this moment, I would say the pop is what, we're thinking about the most and I've noticed a lot of.
You guys released something in September talking about the pick and roll. And what's interesting is I see a lot of supporting triggers or supporting actions coming before the pick and roll. But one of the things that you guys really made that made me think was that what if the pick and roll was actually the supporting action to something else? So you actually made a very good point of what happens if you hit that 2 side and cause like a longer closeout.
Yeah.
And they in 0.5 seconds, they were able to attack the basket, get by their guy, and all of a sudden you're in dominoes. That was very, I mean, I knew that, but for someone to articulate that was very eye-opening. And Dan, something that you guys ask your guests all the time, but I mean, nobody really asks you guys, is where do you see this conceptual flow offense compared to the traditional sets? I mean, being a coach, I think we all see that the NBA, modern day basketball is going towards that kind of flow and conceptual read and react. But I think there's a time and a place where like a traditional organized set does work. Where do you guys see that coming in? Where's the balance? And what is your opinion on having, again, a good balance of both of these things?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I think that there is a place and a need in the game for both. I think that's the art of coaching, is it's just not one or the other. You're not going to come down and run 99 sets every time. You're not likely going to just flow the entire game, because there's going to be parts of the game, situations, ATOs, late game, where you want to get a certain player the ball in a certain spot, or you want to create a certain mismatch, or you want to create a certain closeout. And though flow offense can certainly give you that as a coach to be able to try and dictate some of those things in certain situations, I think that's where the really great coaches come in, where of course they can teach flow. And the best teams know how to play in flow, because that's the hardest to defend when you talk from a scouting standpoint, where, if you're reading, reacting, it's really hard to scout a team over and over. And I think that ATOs, special situations, for sure, you see sets, or sometimes when a team just needs to settle down. Like there's times where as a coach where I think your team's playing in flow, but maybe they're not generating great looks, or they're not figuring out what the defense is doing. And though it's great to want them to figure that out on their own, sometimes as a coach, I think it's helpful to run something that maybe gets what you want, so they feel good about themselves, maybe generate a quality look. And so I think that the great coaches we talked to have that balance of when to stay in flow and then when to maybe run something set wise.
Dan, same question that I asked Pat, but what are you seeing defensively that's really kind of jogging your mind, having you think about like, wow, a lot of coaches are talking about this. Maybe this is something I should dive into. Is there something defensively that you're seeing?
Yeah. Zoning, like all kinds of zones. I mean, you name it. 1-3-1, monster zones, 2-3s, 1-1-3s, box and ones. I mean, zones across the board. I think Pat and I have probably broken down more zones this spring, summer, and fall than we have at any other point. And I think that's, as overall philosophy of basketball is one side of the ball gets really, really good at something, the other side adjusts and you go back and forth. And I think with the rise of how good players are in the pick and roll, how good players are at the read and react type of offense, like you just mentioned, that if you just come down against really good teams and run the same, maybe say man-to-man offense all the time, I mean, of course it can work, but you better be pretty darn good at it and have really good players that can defend it. And I think
Yes.
a lot of coaches are thinking about how to disrupt that. And I think that's where zones come in to just take off the pressure a little bit of having to guard, an Iverson cut leading into a Spain action and pop on the backside. Like the million things that coaches do on offense that are hard to guard, zones are a way to, I think, take that out. And so to answer your question, we've talked to so many coaches about different types of zones, maybe not as their main bread and butter, but as a curveball to throw in throughout the game to kind of help break up the offensive rhythm.
I call that shuffling the deck. It's kind of like when the offense continuously gets the same thing. They kind of catch that rhythm. They're like, all right, this is how we play it now. But I like to call it shuffling the deck. And it's kind of like reading when you feel like the offense is kind of getting a gist of what you're throwing at them, throwing like maybe a matchup 3-2 or something like that to throw them off a little bit. I'm seeing the same thing. And I'm kind of going off topic here, but I'm going to refer to one of your episodes because it hits home with me, with Brian Gorgon, someone who I look up to tremendously. He talked about transition defense and then going into a 1-3-1. I can't remember what he said exactly.
Yeah.
But it is so true what he says. A lot of people don't work on transition defense here. I think that's something that's very, very, very underworked. And if you think about how a 1-3-1-1 would kind of work, right? It kind of gets the wings, so you can kind of match up with the wings, and then whenever the second pass comes, they go into a man. But then I'm seeing something similar to you guys, where how can we protect the rim in transition, but then at the same time get our best rim protector back, and then maybe bump the original rim protector, who's probably a guard, out in order to get the ideal situation. So that's something that Pat, what are you seeing? Because this is something I'm seeing the same thing now too.
Yeah, in terms of transition defense, what we're seeing a lot of too, this would be another trend, is to solve that problem of, always when the traditional, you get safety, but it's usually always going to be a guard. So now you have a guard at the rim. Like a lot of teams are tagging up where they're sending all five to the boards. And through that, the tag up first is you match up. So you match up with whoever's in front of you, you drive them into the paint. And now first and foremost, it's a transition defense because that's your man. We're matched up right away. And then the byproduct is you can get offensive rebounds. But then this also solves, of course, sometimes you have some mismatches, but you're matched up on your man, and right away you can begin to build your transition defense through 5-on-5 matched up. And we've found that this is another way of thinking about it, and where you don't, it's not about sending someone back. It's about we send it everyone goes forward, and then, you flood the paint if you're off the ball. It's almost like a full court shell drill from there, ball you man, and go from there is kind of, a lot of teams are running it over in Europe. And I think a lot of teams are making an emphasis on sending more to the glass and worrying less about sending, get someone back. Because I think you found too, if you aggressively attack the offensive glass, well, the defense isn't thinking about leaking out or not thinking about, taking off. They're thinking about like, I better box my man out, or I got to stay in the paint, or else I'm going to get yelled at if my guy gets a rebound.
It's really great because I'm able to learn so much because I started with tagging up, and it's something that works well. And just for everybody out there listening, I primarily deal with high school kids, middle school and high school kids. And I think it is a phenomenal way to build communication. The one thing that I had is that I found is a couple of things. Number one, the communication needs to be, it just needs to be pinpoint. Or if there's a confusion of two people getting one person, it's pretty much over. Or if someone runs past their man, which they're not supposed to do, it's like a rule of tagging up. The leak happens just like that. If they don't get the inside shoulder, right, and they're forced to force more baseline, those were things that my team struggled with. Now, I think that if you have a really high level team all on the same page, and it's something that's drilled day in, day out, which it should be, and the communication is on point, I think it can really, really work well because you're very aggressive. The one thing is, we just came back from China and I just used tagging up. And I'm not saying that my team is the best at tagging up, because we're clearly not, because half of the other team's points were wide open layups in transition. So because they would leak, like those, that's just what they did. And they were bigger than us. And they you have 6'4" girls who just take the ball with one hand and throw it to the other. And that's where I kind of had to think, okay, what if this doesn't work so well? How do I kind of adjust on the fly so we do protect the rim and make them play us more in like a half court? So that's just a little bit of what I found. I mean, I don't mean to take away the time, but I like this discussion right here because I think we all coach.
Well, I think your experience is what a lot of coaches we've talked to that have tried or are trying tagging up go through. It's the comfort level that you have at, like you mentioned, like we've tried to tag up. I know, Pat, you've got experience with it.
Yeah.
It's a demanding philosophy. And if you're not on them to go to the inside shoulder to tag up every time, they won't, and then breakdowns do happen. And so I think it's a really good point that you're making, and one that we've heard a lot is coaches want to tag up, they want to send more, but it is difficult, and you got to teach it not just like once. It's in every drill, every day, every game. It's got to be taught, and it's not easy. I'll say that.
Did you guys ever experience mismatches with it as well? Because I did, and it's something that, because I know that tagging up was very popular in Australia, and so I asked many Australian coaches. They tend to say no. I had that issue, so I'm just asking what you guys have experienced yourselves.
Yeah, I mean, well, first too, I like to go back because we're tagging up this year, and I mean, what we're struggling with is like the physicality of it. Like our guys, maybe let's say they tag up, but they don't really hit anyone and they don't push anyone. Which is fine. Like then, like I said, it's still about transition defense. So maybe we don't get the benefit of the offensive rebounds, and I'm assuming what maybe you struggled with your team is like, but if you're not on the ball when they catch it or get the rebound, then they can turn, and then they're like a quarterback as everyone's flying around, and they can just start picking people off or throwing long throw ahead passes.
Yep.
And so with our guys, it's a lot of like, all right, you have to be there, because then when he gets the ball, we need the pressure. So basically his eyes aren't looking up the court, they're looking down because they're worried about the pressure.
Right.
And if you can get them take 2-3 dribbles just to the sideline, then now you're allowing all our other guys, all right, we can get situated, we can get back in front. And we're taking away, like you said, those long, because we have the same problem. Like, we tag up, we don't hit anyone. The guy turns, he throws it ahead, and they're immediately with pace, which is like the number one thing you're trying to take away when you tag up, is their ability to play with pace. So that's been one of our struggles. And then, we've had definitely mismatch problems. I mean, not problems, but we get faced with mismatches. Again, this is why we want to be more physical, because first, you don't want to solve it in the backcourt. We had that where like, they see it's a mismatch, and then they go run to try to find their mismatch. And like, as they're running, trying to communicate with that guy. And then that's just, of course, layups. Like you can't solve it in the backcourt. So our guys get over eager, because one, I think you have to realize, like, we know where the mismatches is because that guard or that big knows he's tagged up to someone who's not his matchup. But you have to ask yourself, does the offense know it? Like, just because we know where the weaknesses are doesn't mean like, let's not show our hand. Like first, see if they can solve it. See if they want to come down and just hunt mismatches for the whole possession. And then two, what we do tell our guys is like, that's why at half court, like if you can start to be physical and hit them and slow them up. And, again, if they start going more east-west with their cuts or with their movements, then you can solve the mismatches. Then you can try to get the switches back in, the back. Am I messing up backcourt, front court here? I always get confused.
No, me too. I have the same problem. I got you.
In the half court, then you can solve the mismatch.
Right.
Yeah.
There. But that's what we try to tell our guys. Like, it's all comes down to physicality. And then like, okay, if you don't hit them right away, hit them at half court, slow them up, especially if it's a big. And then if we're all running back, flooding the middle properly, you can then switch out of the mismatch. But the worst thing you can do is, on the rebound, just start crossing the court trying to solve mismatches, because it'll never work.
Yeah.
The offense is going to sprint ahead.
For sure. So, Dan, let's talk about watching film. How do you go about watching film in order to determine what you would do with your players in, say, a technical skill development session?
So I think, and this is something Pat and I talk about a lot because we are consuming all kinds of film from different places, and there's tons of great styles and ways to play. And I think it starts before watching the film to see what maybe we're going to do is just really knowing our players, their skill set, how we philosophically like to play overall. And then from there, I think that as we've done this more and more and watched more film, you have a general sense of what countries play a certain way, what leagues play a certain way. And so, we love to go and maybe find those teams or those countries that play a certain way. And then I'm looking for maybe an action or how they solve a certain situation offensively to maybe plug in with our team. And so, though I love watching all the beautiful offenses from all over the world, it's more or less kind of trying to pinpoint exactly what is needed with our style, with our flow, and then kind of going from there down that rabbit hole.
How about you, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it comes down to, obviously, like Dan said, is you kind of go through the season and you learn your team, you learn, what we want to try to do better, or then from the individual perspective, like maybe a skill or what we want to help a player who's maybe struggling or not understanding maybe what we're trying to teach in terms of pick and roll coverage, or pick anything. And so then what's nice is having the reference of watching a film, one, showing the player or our team like what we're doing wrong, and then I like too when you can show them examples of what you mean, like whether it's a skill this player is doing, playing a drop coverage like this way with this stance, or we've showed with our team we wanted to work on hedge and hedge and plug that we highlighted with Coach Asalo. And so it's kind of like showing them, all right, hey, here's like what we're going for, and giving them that reference, I think also helps a lot on like just the visualization for our players. Because of course, as coaches, we've thought about it a lot, talked about it, so it's clear as daylight in our head, but to the players is like the first time maybe they've heard of it, or we're not in their heads and they're not in our heads. So getting on the same page with just as we learn and grow through the season about our team, showing them our mistakes, and then like I said, kind of them referencing what we want, or of course showing them good examples of them doing it properly. I think is kind of where we're at as a staff, and what we think about when we try to use film and how to improve our team and our guys.
So, Pat, if you're scouting a team, is there kind of a process that you have where you may look at certain characteristics of that team first? Could it be maybe half court sets, transition defense, personnel? Like, is there a process that you have in your head the first time you're looking at a team to see how they play?
Yeah, the first time I just like to get a sense of how they play in terms of maybe are they pace, are they, pace being, I guess, is how they play fast. They want to play slow, or they, kind of know, are they disruptive? Are they aggressive in defense? So kind of the first time through, I just like to watch and just keep it kind of flow through the game and just get maybe like a first impressions, overall flow, and then kind of as I go from there, maybe watch another game. It's more looking at the nuances. Okay, what are some of their sets they want to run, or how do they play the ball screen? And then I guess from there I go to like the personnel. But as it goes, I get more and more familiar with, of course, the players. You see the sets they run for them, and so I guess like flow to over like tactical to individual is kind of as I progress through 2 to 3 games. Is how I kind of like to work it.
Cool. How about you, Dan? Do you have a process on how you watch the opposition?
Yeah, it's similar to what Pat just said. And I think it's a good point he brought up about watching at least some of the full game flow first before starting to dive into individual clips is helpful for me, because, whatever video source or site that you use, you can just quickly, for the most part, go and watch all pick and rolls or go and watch all off ball screens. And you can start building maybe a scout in your head that maybe it's not like the true scout. What I mean is, like, you need to watch the flow of the game to see how they play the pace at which they play. And then I think from there, like Pat mentioned, you can start to get, go through with more of a fine tooth comb as to their actions or whatnot. And so, I'll just second what Pat said as far as watching that first. I think that's also too, like what we do with Slappin class, try to just watch a team for a little bit and you get a sense of the flow. And then you start to really dive in on the little nuances. And then I think the last point that I like to try to do if I have the film or if I can is look at the actions or look at the teams that they've struggled against maybe their main actions. So a team that, if a team's a heavy, I'll just say side pick and roll team, trying to find some place where they didn't play as well, where they weren't as efficient against that, and seeing what those teams did. And then secondly, can we do that? Is it a part of how we play, or is it something, it's too different, just to try to figure out, maybe where there's some weaknesses that we can pinpoint.
So something that they struggled in, something like that, like maybe a bad game that they have. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, a quote that I love from Bill Belichick, though he's, getting his ass kicked now as the Patriots head coach, but back when they were winning championships with Tom Brady in NFL football, he'd always talk about like trying to make teams play left-handed, was a quote in scouting. And it's like, okay, what is it that we can do that just makes, let's say their three main actions, their top three players, their three main ways they play, just make it harder, make them play left-handed there. If they're going to beat us with action 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then for sure they're going to beat you with 1, 2, 3. And so is there a way to figure out where they struggle and how can we maybe double down on those things, or just do that throughout the course of the game to try to gain slight advantages here and there? Easier said than done. Sounds good on a podcast, harder in a game.
Yeah,
definitely. And it's something that needs to be reinforced on a regular basis.
Yes. And you also don't want your team overthinking. Like Pat and I talk about this a lot, and I think a lot of coaches bring up on the podcast is you want players light on their feet. You want them to just not overthink the game, but play the game. And so how much can you give them that they can still do that without, having too much in their brains?
Right. I remember listening to a podcast. I can't remember. It was a while ago, and it was a Greek coach from Greece. And he was talking about that they would force everyone left. Right. They would force everyone left. And unless the scouting reports that this person was a left-handed player. And if I was looking at the court and they were on the right side of the court, they would hedge everything. But if they were on the left side of the court, they would ice everything. And so I thought that was very interesting. And then another coach, Dave Smart from Canada, I think he's now in the States, he mentioned something very interesting. He said that they force left for everything. And the reason is not so much getting them, because usually a very good player would be able to finish and dribble with their left, but that left-handed pass, even high-level players struggle with that. Like even NBA players will struggle with like an off-handed pass. So I thought that was very interesting. But no, that's a very good, very, very good point.
I think Dave Smart's at Texas Tech now. They brought him down to help with that. And so true. Coach and Pat, we've talked coaches on the podcast. It's the passing on the lock left. That's really the big thing.
Yeah.
Super difficult. Well, I'm going to give you guys a dose of your own medicine of start, sub, and sit. But before we go into this, you guys have to tell me how you came up with this, because I think it's pretty genius.
I mean,
I think
sure. Well, thanks. It originally started as something else. Our first, I think there was about maybe 8 to 10 episodes really early on where we did a overrated or underrated segment, which we liked too, but we found that sometimes the overrated, underrated can put coaches in a situation where they're, I don't know, maybe saying something's overrated, that it just was a different type of conversation. Those were good episodes. They were fun, but we just, I don't know, one day before thought, hey, let's give 3 options, start, sub, sit, maybe see how it goes. And our first guest, it was Liam Flynn, who Australian coach. And he just knocked it out of the park. He had fun with it. We had fun with it. And after that episode, I think Pat and I thought this is what we're doing going forward. It's a nice way to explore the game. It's a way that breaks up the podcast for us to get into like just an unknown territory. We don't know where it's going to go. They don't know where it's going to go. Yeah. And we have a ton of fun with it.
So I'm going to start with you first, Dan. Okay. We're going to teach ball pressure in practice today. So start, sub, sit. Start would be the most important one, obviously. So
all right,
take away straight lines. you have to be an arm's length away, or we're going to force bad passes. And the reason I chose these three is because I must have shot maybe 20 emails out to different coaches, and everybody had a different definition of what good ball pressure is. So lay it on
Yeah,
us. Let's start
for
with
sure. I'm going to just pull out the "it depends" card that every coach uses with us, of course. But I think that if you're talking about ball pressure, and we're talking about like on the ball pressure, right? I mean, I think that we're talking about being up. I think that being able to take away like the most obvious next pass is really disruptive. Something that we're trying to work on right now. You know, obviously being up on the ball, moving your feet, keeping the ball in front is huge. If you're just getting blown by, none of this stuff works.
Yep.
But so I guess the start then for me would be taking away straight lines or straight line passes for me, like really making it difficult to make that connecting pass is super disruptive. So that would be my start. I think forcing bad passes would be my sub. And this is something like we talk a lot about is, you know, forcing bounce passes or lob passes in any of our stuff. It just allows that half second for your help to get to where they're supposed to be. So, you know, we always look at how many straight line passes are we giving up and how do we make that into a lob or a bounce pass potentially. And so I guess then my sit would be the arm's length away. And though that's important, I think that's a little bit personnel based, you know, depending on your skill set. We've got a couple of guys on our team that can absolutely crawl in a guy's shirt and be there less than an arm's distance away and still keep the ball in front. And there's some guys that, you know, couldn't keep someone in front of them if their life depended on it. And so they need a little bit more of a gap. And so, you know, we want them to have a touch more gap.
All right, Pat, this is something that I'm actually very interested in myself. Priorities when teaching youth basketball. Basketball IQ. That would be your basic spacing, movement, timing. B, you would be technical, shooting, dribbling, passing. And C, physical qualities, more long-term athletic development, jumping, running, sliding, falling, crawling, rolling, all those different things.
Yeah, this is a good one. I mean, for me, I think I would start technical. I would sub IQ just as a coach and my skill set. That's what I'm more interested in and probably can teach better too. But the physical, I mean, especially in young kids, it's pretty important. We had just recently on Coach Nick Popovich, and I mean, teaching these kids how to land, just how to move. Obviously, he does a lot for injury prevention. But since I'm answering this question, I'll go ahead and then sit the physical. But I mean, I think it all starts with, I mean, at a young age, you got to teach these kids how to just pass, how to dribble, how to shoot, because that's where it all starts. I think then once, I think maybe in the States we get too much into this, and then we got to move on to the IQ and have them build an understanding because the game's played in 5-on-5. So it's how can they use these skills within a 5-on-5 setting and not just continually develop skill where it's, I mean, 1-on-1 or 1-on-0 or in these small, like 3-on-3, which obviously is very important, but you got to get to 5-on-5 and you got to have them understand, and you got to then be able to have them to recognize, well, how can you apply these skills within these situations? And, I think that then starts to teach skill once you can get them in these IQ situations, understand spacing, understanding reads. And then if they can't, well, why can't they? Is it because they can't pass one hand off the dribble? Well, okay, then let's go back. Let's teach some skill, one hand passes there. But for sure, a young age, like you got to do them. I think then the secret or the secret sauce becomes like, how can you teach these skills in a way that's fun for the kids, that's in like a dynamic game environment and not just like block or, like let's go out, like, because they're young kids. You got to make I think you got to make sure they're having fun with the game. Like, I think the most important thing for young kids is making sure they fall in love with the game. And then from there, they'll separate themselves with their work ethic, their will or their desire to get better. And then, we can go from there. But just to come out and yell at them and demand, we're going to do 100-pound dribbles. It's like, well, can you incorporate it in a game where they're dribbling, they're passing, and, then they can start to understand space. I think is really the skill. And I mean, it's tough. I mean, I don't have a ton of great games, but I think that's where kind of the secret sauce is in developing skill in young kids, like how to make it fun and how to help them learn, maybe learning without them knowing.
I'll be honest with you guys. Selfishly, this was that one was my question. So I want to ask Dan. So say for example, we're not dealing with young kids, and we'll take the physical qualities out of this one. Dan, we're dealing with high schoolers. So these could be anywhere between freshmen to guys who are getting ready to play in college. IQ or technical skills. I mean, again, I know this really depends, but if you what you're saying,
yeah, I mean. That's man, splitting hairs for me, because I think that I've coached players that have the technical skills, but just you put them in a 5-on-5 game and they don't understand, and it's almost like the technical skill doesn't matter that much. And then I've coached certain players that just know how to play the game, and maybe they don't shoot it that well, or maybe they're not the greatest ball handler, but boy, your team just wins when they're out there because they know how to play. And so I think I tend to go with the IQ, because I think that the IQ allows a team to play, to win, to get the right kind of shots. And those high IQ players are, usually it seems a little more have a sense of themselves and what their skill set is or isn't. And so I'm going to tend a little bit with that IQ. And I think for me as a coach too, that is where I'm more passionate about, is teaching the game, how to play the game, the IQ at the college level. And obviously the skill is a huge part of it. Nobody's saying you have to have at least some baseline level, but I'm going to go there for that answer.
Right. Just to put my 2 cents into it, my philosophy has changed so much since the beginning of when I first started coaching. I thought that like skill development or technical part would be like basically all you would really need, and you can outskill anybody. But as I got older and more mature, the way that I kind of teach it now is I mean, when I say kids, it could be high schoolers, that you want to make the game as simple as possible. You want to make the game as easy as possible. And this could be learning good spacing, learning good cutting. But it can also be learning what driving angles make sense for the easiest finish, right? So in a sense, that's where it kind of borders technical, tactical to me. Like understanding angles, understanding, if I take this angle, it's a little bit easier. Understanding of in transition, and I've been cutting clips of this. You'll never see a guy in the NBA in transition just go down the sideline and try and finish off the sideline. They always cut middle from the 45. And that's because you have a far easier finish. And if you're going to Euro, you will Euro back to the original side. So it just makes it way easier. But I mean, this was never taught to me in high school. Was this taught to you guys in high school? Probably not, right?
No.
But this is something that makes it just so much easier. And coaches are constantly saying, bad shot. But what does that even mean? Like, what does that bad shot, tough shot even mean? I mean, that's where I feel like we can do a better job, like myself included, on explaining what a good shot is, what a bad shot is, what a tough shot is, and how to make it just easier in general, whether it's technical or tactical.
Yeah.
Sorry to go off on a tangent.
No, it's great.
No, of course. No, I think like you hit on, like the situations will dictate the skill that you need to develop in the players, because maybe some players get it. Like they understand the 45 1 to Euro, maybe. And then you have players in that position that can't read it, that, are just having consistently tough rim finishes. And it's like, okay, well, now we can get to skill development. Now let's work on a floater. Now let's work on a Euro, but I think the most important is like, if you can first get the understanding, like, can they make the read? And if they understand the read, like that's the biggest part. That's the biggest key. And then we can add skill, because they already understand like what the read is. And now they're running up against the wall of why they can't succeed, or why they're not finishing, or, again, why they can see that corner pass, but they can't make it, but like, that's the thing. Like you just do a bunch of skill. And then, like the guys, you go to an AAU game, everyone's Euro stepping, but it's like, all right, great, but good Euro step. But now they're Euro stepping to people. They're Euro step when they don't need to, it's just blind application.
Exactly. Okay, and then the last part of start, stop, and sit, and this is for both of you. We'll start with Dan. You're scouting the opponent. A is going to be transition defense. That matters. I mean, that is the first thing you're going to watch.
Yeah.
Or B is going to be half court offense. Or C is going to be personnel. What is the most important thing to you out of those three?
I'll start with the sit, I'm going to sit transition defense. I think more or less for me, it's somewhat similar. I mean, not a lot of teams are really running intricate transition offensive stuff. I mean, so I think transition defense for us at least is very similar. If there's a team that's just playing a crazy style that we have to change up, that'll rise up a little bit. But I'm going to sit that, and then boy, between the personnel and half court offense, pretty tough, kind of splitting hairs for me there. I think they go hand in hand a touch, but I will say we probably start a lot more with just the half court offense. Like, what are they doing as a team? So I'll start the half court offense. What is it that they run? What are they doing? What are their top 3 or 4 actions? And then I'll sub in then, okay, who's in those actions? What do they do? And how can we maybe make those things tougher? So I'll start half court offense, sub personnel, and sit transition defense.
How are you, Pat?
Yeah, I'll approach it from like what I think our players or is most important for our players. And so I'll start the personnel, and then I'll sub their half court, and then I'll sit the transition defense. And from my experience or what I've seen being a player, and then also now working with our players, is I think they're all competitors. And so if you can show them, whether it's their matchup or their center position, the guard position, just show them, hey, like this guy, and not showing them everything, but like he does this and we want to take this away or anything but this, I think goes a long way, and kind of like putting the challenge on the players, which I think they're always up for. Like it's that everyone has that one-on-one battle, that mano-a-mano thing. And I think, they respond more to that. Maybe they listen a little bit more interested than when you show them, yeah, okay, here's another turn. Here's their turnout set. Here's their horn set.
Yep.
I think sometimes maybe they can tune out. I mean, then that's why obviously you got to be careful in how much you give them and how many clips you show them so they do retain it. But I think from the personnel, I think you can get their attention a little bit easier. And if it's just like one thing, like, hey, we told you he goes right, make him go left. Like, I think for them, it's like clear marching orders, let's say, going into the game.
Yeah. And especially tendencies of different players. And like, this player tends to do this. Here's an edge that you can maybe have when you're guarding him, or if they're guarding you, they tend to stunt a lot, like that kind of thing. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Okay. We will transition into the next segment, which actually it may be a little bit different from a lot of other podcasts, because I feel that coaches as a whole, I mean, we're really givers, and we're willing to take the shirt off our back and give it to our players or help other coaches, just like you guys do, with amazing content. But a lot of the times I feel like the topic of finance when it comes to our industry is not often talked about. Could you guys give maybe your insight on how coaches can put themselves in a solid financial situation later on in their career, or even for retirement?
Yeah. Say, first of all, if you want to put yourself in good financial position, don't go into coaching. That's probably the first advice I would give.
Right.
Free advice right there for you.
Yeah.
But serious, you want me to jump in first, Pat, or you want to take this one?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the things, I mean, and I joke about don't go into coaching, but when you're starting out, I mean, there's not a lot of coaches. If you talk about coaches that their first 5 to 10 years are in a job that allows them to put money away and build towards retirement, it's not a lot. Like I'll think about my first 3 or 4 years of the high school level, I was making $1,400 a year, as a JV coach. And then you're trying to do shooting lessons, and, it takes a long time. And sometimes coaches never get to a point where they're making, I guess, good money to really stay in it. And that's the hardest part about the industry, is trying to stay in it long enough so that you can be financially secure and that you can provide for a family. I think that this isn't a blanket advice situation, because everybody's situation is different, married, kids, all that, what country you're in, those kinds of things. But I think that your lifestyle, the way that you spend your money, it's everybody's different. But if you can just put yourself in a position where you can just stay in it, you can stay in coaching as long as possible and keep doing a great job, that those tables eventually can turn whether it's a better position or high paying job or whatever it is. But there's no doubt it's really tough. I mean, I'll just speak from my point of view here in the United States, even at my level, Division III level, there's not a lot of great paying full-time jobs at that level. And then you go up to Division II, high school, it's very hard. So I think that first and foremost, and I'll kick it to Pat here, is, you got to love it, because you're going to be putting in some time where it's not easy sledding, especially in the beginning financially.
Yeah. For me, I mean, I think what I've learned, and even through playing, is know your value and know, I guess, quote unquote, what you're worth. Now, it comes with a caveat, like you also have to be realistic. Like you have to do kind of an audit on where you are. Like if you are just starting out and you think you're a head coach, and then you might be in a rude awakening, but like knowing where you are in your career or your process and understanding the value you bring, I think it's going to make for a much better situation in terms of the jobs you accept and what you'll be happy doing. And, like Dan said, I think then that'll help you kind of stick and build your career. But, if you, I don't know if compromise is the right word, but if you sacrifice too much of yourself for a job or position, like you're not going to be happy doing it, and it's going to be a struggle. And I think you got to be honest with who you are and know your value and fight for it. Fight for it along the way, and don't be afraid to say no to stuff. I think that's something I learned. Like, we love this game so much that, like you said, we'll do almost anything for it, right or wrong. And I don't think people take advantage of that, but maybe they get away with, getting you to do more for less. And I don't think that's right. And, but then you also have to take the blame for accepting that position.
Right.
So don't be afraid to say no, and know your value, know what you bring to the table at which point in the career you are. Of course, don't be unrealistic either.
Right. Well, as entrepreneurs, you guys have built such a platform, something that I look up to, and I really admire you guys. It's the top platform. For me, it's the top resource that you can go to learn about the tactical side of basketball, but the guests that you guys have on, the value that you guys provide is second to none. Where do you see, where are you guys trying to expand, and how are you guys growing the website, just to give the listeners what's in for Slappin Glass into the future? And if you would, feel free to not answer this question. What may be some of the hurdles that you guys are facing? Because maybe from the outside, everybody's like, oh, these guys have got it good. They've got all these big coaches coming on, but everybody has a struggle. So start with the dreams and the goals that you have for the future.
Sure. Pat, you want to take that one first?
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, I think, we want to know, like, we want to keep doubling down on what we do well, and continuing to, supply that, I guess, or, cater to what our audience or members want, making sure we don't lose focus of like what we do well. But I think, me and Dan have a lot of conversations too about, I think we both enjoy the podcast and getting to talk to these coaches and how we can continue to grow the podcast. If it's, doing another podcast with a kind of a different spin on it, or a different focus. And then, of course, it's continuing. We're fortunate. We've done a lot in the past with Coach Gonzalo Rodriguez, and now we're doing stuff with the Pro Lane. So continuing from a content standpoint, doubling down, but also then finding like-minded coaches who also are doing really good work and bring another perspective to help other coaches, and just continuing to share and disseminate information.
Yeah, I think just adding on to Pat's point, I mean, we remain committed, and I guess, our main focus in providing the highest quality content in the areas that we do. And I think that we constantly are thinking about the other parts of the game that we can continue to add value or grow into. And so Pat just mentioned the Pro Lane is Drew Dunlop and Jake Grossman, really, really great partnership. We're just starting with them and providing, more of the training side and small-sided games type of situation, and building up things so that the website will also have a ton of that, because we're not going to stop providing, the tactical parts of the game, but then adding, okay, how do we train? How do we teach? The conversation we just had on the podcast, like, how do we actually do this? What does it look like? And so the pro lanes come on, and we're going to be doing a ton with them there. I think Pat and I remain really interested also in the mental leadership side of coaching as well, and how coaches can manage stress, how coaches can, all the things that are off the court. I think we've had some conversations that are on the podcast that aren't out yet, that are coming out, that we're really interested in, that decision-making, stress management, sleep, health, nutrition. So we're interested in that. We're going to try to continue to grow that as well. And so, and I think too, eventually we did our first live event last year in Las Vegas Summer League. We had a big coaches social, almost 225, 250 coaches last year, from NBA to high school level, that came out to Vegas. Doing that again this year, adding live events and things like that. And as Pat and I talk about, we joke all the time, there's a million things we could do. And that focused on the things that are important to us, kind of growing naturally from there.
Really cool. And just let everybody know, when is that coaches conference going to be? It's in the summertime?
Yeah. So it's a coaches social that is in the middle of the NBA Summer League. So it's middle of July 9th, I think it is, this upcoming year. And so that was a great event. That was for SG Plus members. So our membership that we have, people that are part of that can get an invite. And then there's some other coaches out there as well that came out. So that was a good time.
Oh man. And then I look forward to getting my invite.
Yeah, you got to come out. We got to get you out there.
No, I mean, I'll actually be in Chicago and Kentucky for AAU tournaments. So maybe I can swing by, because we're taking the girls over to the States for AAU tournaments. Nice. So maybe I will be able to have some time. And then if you would just let people from the outside know, like, running a business is not easy. What are some of the things that you guys might, and feel free to say next question, I totally get it. What are some of the things that people don't see from the outside?
Well, I can take this one first, Pat, if you want. It's a lot of work. I mean, despite what, as you very well know, the end product, we love it. It's awesome when we hear it makes an impact. But, Pat and I work in 24/7. We also are coaching, and our free time mentally is with Slappin Glass. We're always talking, we're always thinking about it. And I think that, the challenge is just, that's a lot of work all the time. But I don't say that in a bad way, because we love it, but it is time. There are Saturdays and Sundays where we're up late or early in the morning doing a podcast, writing a newsletter, and maybe it'd be a lot easier to just kick back and do nothing, but it's important to us. And so, that's one thing. And as much as we've had amazing guests on the podcast too, continuing to find new guests is always a challenge for any podcaster, to continue to, find new people that have fresh perspectives. And so, it's fun, it's amazing, but it's definitely not easy, because it is a lot of work.
Yeah, I'll just second that. I mean, it's time, and it's finding like ways to balance our life too, in terms of being able to just kind of get away from coaching or basketball, because then it obviously, I think, in the long run helps our product. But yeah, we both love it. So I think there's times where we just kind of naturally fall back and I'll just watch some film, have some free time. But I think with a little perspective, that's sometimes unhealthy. So just finding balance in what we do. And I mean, then of course, the back end stuff, like me and Dan are learning a lot. I think we've learned more about technology and Adobe Premiere Pro than we ever would have imagined, and making mistakes along the way, but that's part of the process. But I mean, that's, obviously something every week or every month, just some sort of little hurdle that, we're just, it's not our expertise in teaching ourselves, but that's where just the passion of what we do kind of overrides, like, well, we got to get it done. We got to learn, we got to figure it out. And, we hopefully do at some point.
The ride of an entrepreneur is crazy, as the dread and elation that you can feel in the same day. It's fun, but that's part of it too. I think us just learning to be kind of steady handed through the goods and the bad time. I think there's amazing times. We've had amazing guests. We've also had really tough times. We've also wondered ourselves, are we going to make it? Are we going to push through? Like, and I think Pat and I are united in our vision and all that. And so that makes it easier. We have each other to get through those things, but it's a journey for sure. We could do a whole podcast on that alone.
Absolutely. But your consistency is just, I mean, I look for that every Sunday. I look for my newsletter. I'm like, yo, these guys are late now. I'm just kidding.
No, it's coming.
No. Yeah. I look forward to it. I look forward to getting that newsletter every Sunday. I want the guests to know, or the listeners to get to know you guys just briefly personally. Dan, I would probably know the answer to this, but Pat, if you weren't in basketball, what would you be doing?
Man, good question. The real answer is I have no idea. I mean, this was probably my struggle in college too, figuring out what the hell I wanted to do. But I got an accounting degree. I can't say I obviously love accounting, but I guess that's what I try to do. I mean, I got it at the time thinking like it could at least give me a job or point me in the right direction of like, all right, I'll go be an accountant. So as you can tell by the tone of my voice, I'd be super excited about it. But I guess that would be it. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I studied basketball, I guess, my whole life. And then 4 years I spent studying accounting. So maybe that would be I guess the only fallback I have.
Okay. And you, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think that answer probably changed different parts of your life, but I mean, I still do music quite a bit. You know, I've done a lot in my past. But it's funny. I don't know if I didn't coach, if I would just be a musician. I think, I actually really love being an entrepreneur. I think if that was, I'm interested in, all kinds of interesting tech and business and stuff like that. And so being a part of like a basketball tech startup would be interesting. Like we've gotten to know some people from Slappin Glass that I think that's interesting other avenue to make an impact on the game. And so, those things are out there and are interesting as well. So, I'll continue to always play music and write and do that kind of stuff. But, it'd be interesting to see like that side as well. I don't think I'd be an accountant. Pat was really good at numbers. That's, the way that business still runs is Pat keeps our accounting books fresh and clean. So I do the marketing part. Those are our majors.
Yes.
So it works out.
For those of you who don't know, go and look up Dan on Spotify. It's actually really good music. Like I really enjoyed it. I was on my way to China and actually I was like, oh, I'm going to be interviewing Dan. Let me listen to his music. And I was like, oh wow, he's really good.
I saw that stream come in today. Thank you for that.
Oh
yeah.
No,
thank you. I appreciate
it. I did my research. I was like, wow, okay, he's a vocalist too. So, but
thank you,
guys. You've been awesome. Thank you for all your time. Where can people find out more about you guys?
Yeah, they can. We got a website,
Yeah.
www.slappinglass.com. And from there, you can learn about our podcast. You can subscribe to our free newsletter. Of course, we're on Twitter at Slappin Glass and Instagram, where we're posting daily, podcasts, a couple breakdowns, and then our newsletter as well. So yeah, social media, Instagram, Twitter, and then our website, and you can find all that stuff there as well.
Awesome. Guys, hold the line, but thank you so much. This has been an episode I've been looking forward to a long time, and I'm glad we finally connected.
Yeah, I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This was great.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.